In March 1943, German U-boats are on the rampage, sinking 108 Allied vessels in a single month. Allied officials are desperate. Some fear a German victory in the Battle of the Atlantic is near. If the Allies lose the Atlantic, Britain loses its lifeline, and perhaps even the war itself. Yet by May 1943, the tide has completely turned. The hunters have become the hunted. In just 2 months, the U-boats go from near dominance to devastating defeat. How did it happen? From 1939 onward, German U-boats stalk Allied shipping lanes. Though surface raiders have some success, Admiral Karl Dönitz envisions a tonnage war, a relentless campaign to sink enough merchant shipping to cripple Britain's war effort, or better yet, force its surrender. At first, the U-boats enjoy major success. Dönitz calls the summer of 1940 the happy time, when submarines easily prey on isolated merchantmen, sinking 471 ships. When the United States enters the war in 1942, sinkings surge to 1,160 vessels. U-boat crews dub this period the second happy time, or even the American shooting season. For Winston Churchill, the Atlantic is the decisive front, the one on which all others depend. By late 1942, it's also one of the few places where Germany remains on the offensive. In November 1942 alone, U-boats sink 768,000 gross tons of Allied shipping, their wartime peak. Churchill urgently calls for help from his allies and even dictates that the German threat be referred to properly. Enemy submarines are to be called U-boats. The term submarine is to be reserved for Allied underwater vessels. U-boats are those dastardly villains who sink our ships, while submarines are those gallant and noble craft which sink theirs. At the Casablanca Conference in January 1943, American leaders agree to prioritize the Atlantic campaign and postpone the invasion of France and Germany until 1944. While some Allied commanders are frustrated, most recognize that it's impossible to launch any invasion while the U-boat menace still lurks in the Atlantic. Even with this new commitment, the Allies face severe logistical strain. Resources are limited, and each branch of the Allied forces is competing for what's available. Meanwhile, Dönitz commands more submarines than ever before. In 1939, he had just 39 operational U-boats. By early 1943, that number has risen to around 300, with more still under construction. Then, in January 1943, when Grand Admiral Erich Raeder resigns as Commander-in-Chief of the Navy, Hitler promotes Dönitz to the top post. He orders him to intensify operations in the Atlantic. Dönitz, however, remains pragmatic, warning in a radio address, "The harsh realities of the submarine war mean that even more difficult times lie ahead of us." With a submariner now commanding the entire Kriegsmarine, the Allies brace for an even deadlier campaign. A key concern remains the mid-Atlantic air gap, a vast stretch of ocean out of range of Allied aircraft, notorious among sailors as Torpedo Junction. By 1943, the Royal Canadian Navy's expansion allows for near-continuous naval escort across the Atlantic, but ships remain vulnerable without air cover. Bases in Britain, Iceland, Canada and the US have expanded air patrols, yet a gap of up to 1,000 kilometres still lingers near the Cape of Farewell. Allied commanders attempt to plug the gap with escort carriers by often converted merchant ships and very long-range VLR bombers like the B-24 Liberator. But as of January 1943, British Coastal Command has just 6 of these long-range bombers. Most are diverted to the strategic bombing campaign over Germany or the Pacific Theatre. Meanwhile, the Germans gain a dangerous advantage. In December 1941, their naval intelligence service, the Beobachtungsdienst, cracked Britain's naval cipher number 3. Intercepting Allied communications allows them to coordinate devastating wolf pack attacks on convoys. At one point, U-boats locate around 70% of Allied convoys through intercepted signals. Adding to Allied woes, Operation Torch, the 1942 invasion of North Africa, drains vital naval resources. The Royal Navy diverts 125 destroyers and escorts to the Mediterranean, while fuel shortages limit convoy evasive manoeuvres. The result is catastrophic. In March 1943 alone, U-boats and German surface raiders sink 120 Allied ships worldwide, totaling 704,000 tons, 484,000 of them in the Atlantic. That's a 74% increase from February. A British memorandum from March warns, "There is insufficient shipping to allow us to develop offensives against the enemy. We can no longer rely on evading the U-boat packs and must fight the convoys through them." Some historians later described this as a crisis month, though modern research suggests the situation was less dire. The worst losses came from just 2 convoys and 22 ships out of 90, while overall only 31% of convoys were attacked, compared to 52% in November 1942. In fact, the first quarter of 1943 saw fewer sinkings than any quarter in 1942. Allied ship production also outpaced losses, resulting in a net gain of 2 million tons by March. German records, too, show no sign of triumph, and within 2 months, the U-boats are in full retreat. Even as the March battles rage, Allied leaders convene the Atlantic Convoy Conference to coordinate strategy. Their top priority: close the air gap and take the fight directly to the U-boats. The Commander-in-Chief of the Western Approaches writes optimistically, "I really have hopes now that we can turn from the defensive to another and better role, killing them." Early 1943 marks a turning point, as several Allied innovations converge. The famous ultra-intelligence from decrypted Enigma messages provides broad U-boat positions, allowing London's submarine tracking room to reroute convoys. But Ultra is slow, sometimes taking up to 72 hours to decode, and occasionally goes dark when Germans change settings. It's invaluable for strategy, but not precise enough to stop attacks in real time. That's where new technology steps in. Improved sonar, ASDIC, and radar give escorts unprecedented detection power. ASDIC reveals U-boats' range and bearing underwater, enabling more accurate depth charge attacks, while new 10-centimetre radar can spot submarines on the surface. Together, they form a deadly web of detection. One sailor recalled, "The first indication of a U-boat was from the ASDIC men. You'd hear the pings, and the difference between ping and pong told you how far away it was. When they thought they were over it, the order came, 'Fire!' The sea would erupt, like lightning across the water." German submariner Anton Staller, aboard U-188, described being under attack. Alarm bells shrilled loudly. "Destroyer on the starboard bow." The manometer read 100 meters when the depth charges exploded. The noise underwater was appalling. Though terrified, I strained to hear through the hydrophone, wondering if I'd ever hear again. Another major development is high-frequency direction finding, Huff-Duff. This detects U-boat radio transmissions up to 25 kilometers away, far beyond radar range, letting escorts hunt rather than react. By 1943, most convoys have at least 2 Huff-Duff-equipped escorts. Tactics also improve. Civilian scientist P.M.S. Blackett's studies reveal that larger convoys with 8 escorts are more efficient than smaller ones with 6, freeing ships to form mobile support groups that rush to help convoys under attack. Air power, too, begins to dominate. By May, Coastal Command has 49 very long-range bombers, up from just 17 in February. Aircraft like the B, 24 Liberator, Whitley, Sunderland, and Catalina now patrol deep into the Atlantic, accounting for nearly half of U-boat losses. The impact is immediate. In April, the Allies lose 39 merchantmen, but sink 15 U-boats. Then comes May, the decisive month. Convoy SC-130 sails from Halifax to Liverpool with 37 merchantmen and 8 escorts, several equipped with Huff-Duff and new radar. German intelligence identifies it, deploying 25 U-boats in 3 wolf packs, Donau 1 and 2 from the southeast, and Iller already waiting. The plan is to strike in the air gap. British Ultra knows of the danger, but a communications failure keeps the warning from the convoy's commander. Even so, on May 18th, the escorts sweep aggressively and foil the attacks. When Allied aircraft arrive, the U-boats are forced to dive or retreat. By May 21st, Dönitz abandons the assault. The Allies lose no ships and sink 3 U-boats, including U-954, aboard which Dönitz's own son, Paul, perishes. SC-130 marks the breaking point. In May 1943 alone, Germany loses 41 U-boats, nearly a quarter of its operational fleet. Kapitän-Leutnant Peter Erich Kremer recalled, "The situation was out of hand. More than 1 boat a day was lost. We called it Black May." On May 24th, Dönitz orders a complete withdrawal from the Atlantic. So why did the U-boats collapse so quickly? Allied technology and tactics were part of it, but German missteps played a major role. Their intelligence failed to detect Allied advances like radar, Huff-Duff, or Enigma decryption. Dönitz's rigid command structure also required constant radio reports, exposing submarines to detection. During the SC-130 battle alone, 104 transmissions were intercepted. Meanwhile, Dönitz's pleas for Luftwaffe air cover were ignored by Hermann Göring, who refused to divert aircraft. And though U-boat numbers grew, experience plummeted. In 1940, commanders averaged 2 years of experience. By 1943, just 8 months. Many of those killed in May had completed only 1 or 2 patrols. By war's end, 75% of all U-boats built would never sink a single ship. In 1940, an average U-boat sank 430 tons of shipping per day. By 1943, it was down to just 65. Germany's last offensive theatre had turned against it. Dönitz would attempt to rebuild with new submarine designs and smaller attack groups, but the wolf packs never regained their power. The Atlantic became an Allied highway, the vital artery of the D-Day invasion to come. 2 years after Black May, Admiral Karl Dönitz would briefly lead Nazi Germany itself, after Hitler and Goebbels committed suicide in the Berlin bunker as the Red Army closed in. The hunters of the Atlantic had become its ghosts.